Was that your 3-minute timer that went off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Cunningham, and I am my family has owned the property alongside Mono Lake since 1919. I have a statement that I'd like to read here, and I just hand-delivered a package to all of you. I know that there are a lot of people in the audience here. I was requested to come here by the people of June Lake. There are a lot of people in the audience here who would like to speak, and I believe that many of them will allocate their time so that you can get the full picture of what's going on here. I know Supervisor Hunt, Supervisor Johnston, Supervisor Alpers know bits and pieces of this saga for various reasons. Tim and I have been neighbors along the side of Mono Lake for years. He has seen it. I first met Larry Johnston because I was directed by the Forest Service in order to value our property, to determine what Mono County would reasonably be expected to approve in the way of a development so that the property could be valued. Larry and I met many times in Mammoth Lakes. For me, it's a drive from Santa Cruz, California here, so every time I come here, it's at least 13 hours round trip. Supervisor Hunt, you and I knew each other from when Joanne Ronci sat where you were, Ed Linwood was here, and Joanne Ronci handed the gavel to somebody and started crying when she was talking about her personal devastation when she saw that Lodge devastated. And then you were involved when the Mono County Board of Supervisors unanimously passed a resolution asking the federal government, the Forest Service, to do business with me and my wife in good faith, because the Mono County Board of Supervisors saw that they had time and time again refused to honor the appraisal instructions that they themselves had drafted. So at the end of my little bullet point discussion here, I think there will be an awful lot more clarity as to how Mr. Gregory has been able to manipulate the situation here. And you have a copy of this bullet point in front of you. I've asked the clerk to enter this into the record. I've asked her to enter the package that has been delivered to you into the record. Those are documents that substantiate everything that I say here. Everything I say in the record here can be substantiated and is factual, yes?
Yeah. Your package is the one that starts off with Q. Paul Roaster.
The first page. That shouldn't be the first page. It is the Paul Oster. That's a statement. That's a transcription of a telephone message that was left on my answering machine. So Tim, that should be in the package also.
Then I'm going to give him some exercise.
Okay, good, because we're going to hit that.
In 1999, the United States Forest Service described the Cunningham property, 118 acres along the western shoreline of Mono Lake, as, quote, the most environmentally significant privately owned property in the western United States. In January 2000, a representative of the Forest Service, Rick Murray, of the Levine Ranger Station, contacted me and my wife and asked if we would consider including all or part of our property in this Forest Service exchange. These transactions do not cost the taxpayers a penny and provide a vehicle for the government to acquire exceptionally environmentally significant property by exchanging it for property with little or no environmental significance. The Mono Lake property was originally designated as a part of the Snow Creek Exchange with Dempsey Development of Mammoth Lakes. In the spring of 2000, at a meeting in the office of the Dempsey Development, Tom Dempsey, who had experience in Forest Service exchanges, explained to me that we must work together to ensure that my family receive a fair value for our property and that the property that Dempsey wanted to acquire from the Forest Service was fairly valued. Tom Dempsey stated, and I quote, "The whole Forest Service exchange process is corrupt." He went on to say, quote, "The main problem is the appraisal process." He said that Forest Service approved appraisers will lie, cheat, and steal. Soon after the meeting with Tom Dempsey, I returned to Mono Lake from my home in Santa Cruz and met with Rick Murray of the Forest Service, with Adam Poe, the exchange facilitator, who would eventually work on the hospital exchange and would also eventually work on the main lodge exchange for Russell Gregory. And with Mitch Dunshee, the Forest Service approved appraiser. At this meeting, Mr. Dunshee, the appraiser, stated, quote, "We will give you $1,000 an acre, or $120,000 for all of your property," quote, "because it lies within the National Forest Scenic Area, and the Forest Service will not allow you to subdivide your property, and if you want to rebuild the house on the property, the Pinier House, we will only allow you to build 150% of the square footage." He said, "Your property is almost worthless because it lies within the Mono Basin National Forest Scenic Area." I asked him, "I thought you were an appraiser for the Forest Service." He said, "I am." I said, "Who gave you the authority to make me an offer on my property?" He said, "The Forest Service." And so I said I was going to just drive home to Santa Cruz. Adam Poe, the facilitator, said, "Let's drive up on the property." So we drove up on the property, and the Forest Service approved appraiser in person from the Forest Service drove up in a car behind me. Mr. Poe recommended that I get an attorney to find out if the federal government in fact has zoning authority on my property. I asked around and I contacted Jim Reed, the former county counsel for Mono County, and also a co-author of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. Jim Reed contacted Marshall Rudolph and Scott Burns, and he located a document that was prepared for Scott Burns by Marshall Rudolph, giving his opinion as to whether or not the Forest Service Scenic Area Guidelines do in fact supersede Mono County zoning authority, and Marshall Rudolph opined that they do not. Jim Reed Roger Porter of the U.S. Forest Service for the Riding Ranger Station, after about 6 months, told me that the Office of General Counsel, the attorneys for the Forest Service, agreed with Marshall Rudolph of Mono County and said that our property had to be valued based upon what Mono County would reasonably be expected to approve in the way of the development. He went on to tell me that the Forest Service has been claiming an authority that they know that they do not have in order to acquire property at a lower value. The new Forest Service appraisal instructions for the Mono Lake property stated that the property had to be based on, quote, what Mono County would reasonably be expected to approve in the way of a development, and comparable sales data had to reflect real estate trends for comparable properties in Mono Lake and other resort areas. You can all see this in your package that I gave you in the letter from Supervisor Tom Parnetti to Diane Weinstein dated January 22nd, 2004. Soon after that, Tom Dempsey passed away unexpectedly. And those at Dempsey Development came to the conclusion that the Forest Service was not going to honor their own appraisal instructions for the Mono Lake property, and they informed me that they were going to have to look elsewhere for their property. On August 12, 2003, the Mono County Board of Supervisors unanimously passed Resolution R03-059, quote, urging the swift and fair completion of a land exchange between Bill and Robin Cunningham and the United States Forest Service. The board did this only after it became clear to them that the Forest Service had no intention of valuing our property according to their own appraisal instructions. Again, see the letter from Barnetti to Feinstein for those appraisal instructions. Soon after the resolution was unanimously passed by the Mono County Board in late 2003 or early 2004, our property was identified for the Mammoth Lakes Community Hospital Exchange, which would have allowed Mammoth Lakes Community Hospital to expand, which would have allowed the town of Mammoth Lakes and Mono County to build a civic center in downtown Mammoth Lakes, and would also allow the Mammoth Lakes Fire Department to expand. It is important to understand that in 2004 was before the Great Recession. It was before the Mammoth Lakes Airport fiasco, which brought the town of Mammoth Lakes to its knees. Had that exchange happened, this meeting would probably be held in the Civic Center in Mammoth Lakes, would not be held here today. In January 2004, Mono County Supervisor Tom Barnetti traveled to Washington, D.C. and met with officials in the office of Senator Dianne Feinstein, Senator Boxer, and Congressman Buck McKeon. Mr. Barnetti explained that, quote, "Our community urgently needs your help. We ask you to encourage the U.S. Forest Service to accept the Mason & Mason appraisal of the Cunningham/Mona Lake property as prepared for the American Land Conservancy, thereby preserving this significant scenic property for the public use and removing the final obstacle for the hospital to expand." Again, that's important. You've got Barnetti's letter. It is important to note that this exchange would have enabled, in April of 2004, soon after Supervisor Barnetti went to Washington, D.C. to elicit the help of Senator Feinstein and Boxer and Congressman McKeon, in April of 2004, Jed Rivera of the office of U.S. Senator Feinstein called my wife and me and asked us if we would be willing to negotiate with Mammoth Mountain Ski Area on the Main Lodge exchange instead of proceeding with the hospital exchange. There's a letter in your package from my wife to John Watts, Senator Feinstein's office, that goes into that meeting. That's a very good letter for you to read, because Senator Feinstein's office is essentially, after much communication that I have copies of, has said that their office never contacted me. I can prove that they did, because I was with my congressman, who's a good friend of mine, when we had a discussion with Feinstein's chief of staff about this issue. My wife and I agreed to redirect the focus of our negotiations only after we were assured by Senator Feinstein's intern, Jed Rivera, that our doing so would not adversely impact the hospital, town, county, and fire department exchange, and that our Mona Lake property would be valued according to the appraisal instructions as defined by the Forest Service. On June 21st, 2004, Paul Loster, my real estate agent, and I met with Mammoth Mountain CEO Rusty Gregory at his office in the Main Lodge building. There were a total of 5 people at this meeting. Mr. Gregory, while holding a copy of the Mason & Mason appraisal, the very same appraisal that Tom Barnetti went back to Washington to get them to approve, while holding this appraisal in his hand of $3,815,000, sitting across the table with me, the appraisal's about like a telephone book, started hitting it against the table, and he looked at me and he said, "I will give you $2 million for your property. And if you do not accept this offer, your property will be worthless, because I will prevent you from developing it, because I need to be in the good graces of the environmental community," which in this case is the Mona Lake Committee, who has actively spread misinformation favorable to the Mammoth Mountain Exchange throughout the years. The meeting abruptly ended when I said that I don't do business like that, and I stood up and I asked Paul Loster, my real estate agent, to leave. Paul and I got into the elevator on the 4th floor of the Main Lodge, and he looked me in the eyes and said, "Don't say a word in this elevator." We went down 4 floors, we're walking across the parking lot to his car, and he looked at me and he said, "I've been doing high-end business in this community for 30 years. He said, "I've never been in a meeting like that before." July 1st, 2004, I was at my home in Santa Cruz. I'd been baling hay all day long for some draft horses that are owned by a friend of mine. I grow hay for him on the property I have in Santa Cruz. And I got home at the end of the day and I was dead. And I walked in and I looked at my answering machine and it was blinking. And I went over and I hit the answering machine. This is about a week and a half after Rusty Gregory had had his little discussion with me in his office. So the answering machine was blinking and I hit the answering machine and it was the voice of Jeff Bailey, the supervisor for the Inyo Forest out of Bishop. The transcript of exactly what Jeff Bailey said is, you have it right in front of you there, Tim, it's the one that's right here. It's the letter that starts out with Paul Oster. Jeff Bailey essentially reiterated the threat of Rusty Gregory, telling me that if I didn't do business with Rusty Gregory, they were pretty much down the road, and that, well, if you don't do business, Rusty's going to prevent you, blah, blah, blah. You've got the transcript of that. I've got 6 copies of the tape. I can make many more. If you'd like to have a copy of the audio tape, I can provide that to you also. On On January 7th, 2005, Mammoth Mountain